start with the graph of the sine function. So get some axes in here first. All right, and the graph of sine does a thing like that. Okay, that's the sine function, and what we would like to do is talk about the inverse. Unfortunately, if you take this graph and you hold the upper right corner and the lower left corner, and then you rotate your wrist to flip the page diagonally, the new picture we're looking at, don't look at the axes labels anymore, but the new picture we're looking at does not satisfy the vertical line test. Really, you could say that this here doesn't pass the vertical line test because if we go back and flip back the other way, here we do not pass the horizontal line test. So what we want to do is take just enough of the graph of sine so that the horizontal line test passes. So we're actually creating a new graph. It's like a restricted bit of sine. We want all the same amount of range, right? So we want the range from -1 to 1. And we just want to flip that part. Now what I'd like to do is actually redraw that below here. Okay, so we've got just this portion of the graph. So in orange up here we have sine. This let's call restricted sine. Yeah, so the y value at that point is 1. The y value at this point is -1. Let's see, what about x values? Let's see, if this right there is the restart of the cycle and the period is 2 pi, then this should be pi, and halfway between x-intercept and x-intercept, this should be pi over 2 right there. So pi over 2 here and -pi over 2 there. All right, now if we look at this, because this graph has the same range, the same collection of y values, -1 all the way up to 1, then but this graph shown in black here satisfies the horizontal line test. So when we flip it this way, what we're looking at here is the graph of sine inverse. So drawing that on a new sheet of paper, let's start a new sheet here. We're just really copying that shape. Okay, it goes up like that, down to right here. If we note, because of how we flipped, look, there's a 1 here that's sideways. There's a tick mark there with a -1 that's sideways. And then this should be -pi over 2, and here should be pi over 2. Okay, so now for this is the arcsine, or the inverse sine. Okay, but what's interesting about this is that the inputs go from -1 to 1, whereas over here in the restricted sine, the outputs went from -1 to 1. Here the outputs go from -pi over 2 to pi over 2, whereas here the inputs in the restricted sine went from -pi over 2 to pi over 2. So that is how you take the graph of sine, which has too much stuff, cut just enough of it so that you have the range of sine, which is this piece right down here, right? And then if you flip this diagonally, you get this picture nice and redrawn right there.